Hey there! Tonight, we're stepping into the shadows and lamplit corners of ancient Rome to explore the surprisingly detailed and often wildly misunderstood world of Roman prostitutes. Let's set the mood. Imagine narrow streets echoing with laughter, the faint hum of gossip drifting from a smoky tavern, and a secret or two scribbled on the wall for all to see. Stick around, because by the end of this chapter, you'll hear about one marketing strategy so outrageous it would make even the boldest modern influencer blush. If you find yourself enjoying this blend of weird history and nighttime storytelling, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe, only if it actually makes you happy. Now, I want to know, where in the world are you watching from? And what time is it for you right now? Drop it in the comments, and let's build a global circle of night owls, insomniacs, and history lovers. So, dim those lights, get comfortable, and let's drift together into a world where sleep and scandal go hand in hand. You come to, not so much waking, as clawing your way out of a haze, in a room so cramped that stretching your arms means smacking an elbow against ancient brick. Welcome to your Roman studio apartment, which is really just a glorified cellar. It's the ultimate work-from-home arrangement. If your office was a shoebox and your job came with a mandatory oil supply. Here, privacy is a fairy tale, and the only thing separating your bed from your business is a thin wall that stops exactly 0 conversations, odors, or awkward stares. These rooms, sometimes stacked above noisy taverns, sometimes buried deep in the back of a brothel, are the default headquarters for many of Rome's working women. Picture a studio flat designed by someone who actively resents light, air, and the concept of personal space. Your mattress is a lumpy affair, packed with straw and, if you're feeling optimistic, only lightly colonized by fleas. The aroma in the air is a complex blend of cheap wine, stale smoke, and the universal human experience of mild regret. If you're feeling lucky this morning, you might spot your little oil lamp still perched on the shelf, miraculously untouched by sticky fingers in the night. Your worldly possessions, some bargain makeup, a dented comb, and, on a good day, a bronze mirror, are shoved into a corner as if they, too, have given up on upward mobility. There's no running water, no plumbing, and certainly no ensuite. For those moments when nature calls, you have a bucket you try not to think about for too long. Bathing is a communal affair, and we'll get to that carnival of awkwardness in a moment. But right now, there's no time to wallow. This room is not just your home, it's your storefront. Business hours are whenever someone stumbles in, bangs on your door, or shouts your name from the hallway. Privacy is a modern invention. In Rome, walls are little more than suggestions, and doors are more for decoration than actual security. Your day kicks off with a frantic sweep, literally. You brush away last night's dust, mysterious stains, and the occasional misplaced sandal left behind by a client who ran out in a hurry. Then it's time for your morning transformation. You reach for the face powder, the rouge, and enough perfume to become a mild fire hazard. The goal here isn't to smell good, just to out-compete the guy in line behind you. You practice your best sultry but not too tired smile in the bronze mirror. It's not fooling anyone, but sometimes pretending is half the job. One customer once called you charmingly awake, and you're still savoring the memory. This is the daily opening routine. cramped, rushed, and held together by just enough dignity to make it to midday. But before you can start dazzling potential clients, it's hygiene time, or what passes for it in the Roman Empire. Forget about a private bathroom. That's the sort of luxury that even the upper crust only half enjoys. For you, the best options are a public fountain, or, if you're feeling daring and have a handful of coins, the city's bustling bathhouse. If you're pressed for time, and let's be honest, you almost always are, the communal fountain will have to do. You splash water on your face, maybe rinse your mouth with a bit of wine if you're feeling fancy, and cross your fingers that the fountain hasn't just been used to rinse a chicken or two. Soap is a myth, but you might have a pinch of natron, a gritty cleaning powder that exfoliates your skin and, at the same time, your self-worth. On days when business has been good and your purse is jingling, you might treat yourself to the bathhouse, the great Roman equalizer. Everyone's there, merchants, philosophers, retired gladiators, and that one guy who never stops talking about his digestive issues. You undress, stash your belongings in a cubbyhole you trust, far too much, and wade into tepid water, swirling with philosophical debates and someone else's questionable grooming choices. After a session in the steam room, you scrape yourself down with a curved strigil, savoring the fleeting moment when you're the cleanest person on your block, a title that, in Rome, lasts about 5 minutes. Drying off, you reapply perfume with the enthusiasm of someone determined to mask all evidence of public bathing. Deodorant hasn't been invented yet, so you improvise. A dusting of chalky face powder, a touch of rouge, and thick coal eyeliner finish the look. The point isn't to highlight your beauty, it's to disguise how tired you actually are. Clients aren't interested in someone who's handled 3 senators and a sailor before noon. They want intrigue, allure, and the faint whiff of mystery, not yesterday's lentils. Now that you're clean, or at least convincingly aromatic, it's time to get dressed. Fashion in ancient Rome is a loaded subject, but for you, there's really only one option: the female toga. And here's the plot twist. When most people picture togas, they think of senators, emperors, maybe a frat party or two. In your case, a toga is not a political statement. It's your professional uniform. Roman law actually forbids you from wearing the stola, the modest, layered dress reserved for respectable matrons. That garment says, "My husband manages my dowry, and I'm in bed by dusk." Your toga, on the other hand, is short, boldly colored, and designed to scream, "Available for negotiations," from across a crowded forum. You accessorize with the finest discount jewelry, bronze or glass beads and earrings that clinked together every time you move. Subtlety is a luxury for the rich or the married. In your world, visibility is everything. When you're competing with 20 other women within shouting distance, being demure is the fastest way to go hungry. Footwear is optional. On most days you'll wear simple sandals, but sometimes you go barefoot, either because you're feeling brave or because your last pair mysteriously disappeared with someone else. Comfort is not high on your list of workplace perks. Then there's your hair, a daily ordeal in itself. Roman prostitutes often curl and dye their hair, sometimes popping on a wig, especially if it's a bright blonde imported all the way from Gaul. Blonde hair in Rome is the ancient equivalent of a luxury import. exotic, attention-grabbing, and a sign that you mean business. The finishing touches are all about contrast, pale skin, red lips, and so much kohl around the eyes that even a tired owl would be jealous. Surveying your reflection. The truth is obvious. You don't just look obvious, you are obvious. But in a city of 1 million people, that's exactly what you want. Your outfit is your business card. If it makes you look bold, scandalous, and unmistakably open for business, then congratulations. You're ready for another day of being judged by the same society that quietly keeps you in business. Fully dressed, painted, and perfumed, the real challenge begins. Finding clients in a city where everyone wants what you're selling, but nobody wants to admit it. Ancient Rome is refreshingly honest about its double standards. There are no pamphlets, no dating apps, and definitely no PR consultants. If you want clients, you have to be seen, be loud, or get yourself immortalized in graffiti. Ideally, all three. Let's talk marketing strategy. If you work in a brothel, your office is strategically situated near places with high foot traffic, public baths, markets, or the local watering hole. In other words, anywhere people are already sweaty, bored, or easily convinced to make questionable decisions. Picture ancient foot traffic optimization, but with more togas and less personal space. You stand in the doorway, decked out in your brightest colors, calling out to anyone who looks even vaguely interested. Your pitch is a mixture of flattery, persuasive negotiation, and the occasional time-sensitive special, 2 denarii if you're quick. It might sound desperate, but rent is due, and the woman 2 doors down just dropped her price to 1. Competition is fierce, and subtlety is a luxury you simply can't afford. If you're a freelancer, your strategy revolves around mobility. You might linger near temples, because nothing says divine inspiration quite like a little temptation, or patrol the entrance to a busy tavern, ready to charm a legionary with more coins than sense. Flexibility is your superpower, and every street corner is a potential sales pitch. But perhaps the most ingenious and undeniably weird form of ancient Roman advertising comes in the form of wall graffiti. Pompeii, with its perfectly preserved brothel walls, is the ancient world's answer to Yelp. The walls are covered in handwritten reviews. Maritimus gave me the best night of my life. Or Felicia, 2 denarii, very fast service. These aren't just random scrolls. They're testimonials, ancient word-of-mouth marketing in its rawest form. Some women even paid someone to write their name and specialty where it would be seen, usually near a tavern entrance or on a busy street. Others let their clients do the writing, which often resulted in reviews ranging from glowing praise to incoherent poetry about being robbed. All of this highlights one crucial truth. Survival in this business depends as much on marketing as on skill. If people don't know your name, your rates, and your signature move, someone else is getting their coin. Just like today, it's not always about being the best. It's about having the best PR. So, you've put yourself out there. The outfit screams, open for business. The eyeliner says, I haven't slept since Tuesday, and you've mustered just enough fake enthusiasm to get through the day. Now comes the delicate matter of pricing, where ancient Rome likes to pretend it's all about free markets, while secretly judging you. Let's be honest. There's no union, no benefits package, and definitely no HR department looking out for your mental health. Prices are set by the wild forces of supply, demand, and whatever you can negotiate before someone tries to pay you with a loaf of stale bread. For those at the bottom rung, street workers or those in the seedier brothels, prices can be as low as 1 or 2 asses, a tiny bronze coin that wouldn't even buy you a lukewarm cup of wine. That's right. Some clients pay less than the cost of a cheap lunch. If that feels bleak, remember that payment could come in the form of food, sandals, or, in truly desperate times, a vague promise to pay you later. Yes, in a city flooded with coin, IOUs are still a thing. At the other end of the spectrum, you have the high-end professionals, the meretrices, who operate more like luxury brands than public utilities. These women can command silver denarii, sometimes several per client, especially if they offer more than just physical entertainment. Conversation, music, poetry, even basic literacy, all these skills make you more valuable. Some carve out a niche. Maybe you're the go-to for sailors, or you wow clients with an erotic dance, or maybe you can recite poetry mid-transaction. Don't laugh. Someone out there probably finds it moving. The more unique your brand, the harder you are to replace. Repeat clients might get a discount, or they might not. It all depends on whether they paid promptly last time, or if they smell like they've been fermenting cabbage in their tunic. If you're working under a pimp or brothel owner, a considerable chunk of your earnings disappears before you ever see a single coin. And for those who are enslaved, payment is a cruel joke. Your compensation is food, shelter, and the distant hope that you might one day buy your freedom. If the gods are feeling generous and you somehow win the ancient Roman lottery. And so, the daily grind continues. You wake up in your windowless office, brave the communal bath, plaster on your war paint, and step out into the chaos of the Roman streets, ready to be judged, ignored, praised, or scorned by a city that needs you as much as it loves to pretend it doesn't. Now, take a deep breath and shake off the dust of the street, because our journey doesn't end here. Next, we'll step through the infamous doorway of the lupanar, the Roman brothel itself, and discover what daily life looked like behind those notorious walls. Step right up. Your Roman HR orientation continues, and today we're onboarding you into the glamorous, stone-walled world of the lupanar. Think of it as Rome's answer to the modern open-plan workspace, only with fewer ergonomic chairs and more existential crises. Welcome to your new office, a brothel that's got all the architectural charm of a municipal prison. But hey, at least the roof doesn't leak. Much. Let's talk job title. You're a lupa or she-wolf, which is Roman for prostitute, but it also doubles as a brand mascot. Roman HR, always ahead of the curve on humiliating nicknames. If you ever wondered about the company's commitment to employee identity, rest assured, here, your job is literally synonymous with an animal. Did someone say team spirit? Lupanars are usually squeezed between bathhouses and noisy bars, strategically placed to catch the overflow of half-tipsy senators and sailors with more ambition than coins. 2 stories, a tangle of stone corridors, and just enough lighting to make you question your life choices without seeing every detail. You'll find a row of tiny, cell-like chambers lining each hallway, each room just big enough to fit a stone bed, a scratchy mattress, and the echo of your co-worker's existential sighs. Doors? That's a luxury reserved for the top 1%. You, my friend, get a curtain, perfect for that collaborative workspace vibe. Privacy is for rich people. You get the dulcet tones of snoring through linen and the gentle percussion of sandals slapping the floor at all hours. Naturally, you're not running this pop-up hospitality nightmare on your own. Every Lupina comes with its own dedicated management team, which basically means there's a Leno, or pimp, or a Lena, which is a madam, and their management style is a mix of the over-the-top motivational speech you'd expect from a used chariot salesman and the subtlety of a tax auditor. Their job is to take a healthy cut of your earnings, promise repairs or career development, and occasionally shout inspirational slogans like, "Work faster, he's a regular." There's no HR hotline, but you can always count on the Leno to remind you that the mop is communal. Clients? Picture a parade of humanity's finest nervous teenagers hoping for wisdom, off-duty legionaries with questionable tattoos, balding senators who swear they're here for philosophical research, and the occasional poet who believes reciting bad verse is an acceptable form of foreplay. Some are in and out faster than you can say minimum wage, while others linger, eager to share their deepest thoughts on Cicero or the proper way to cook lentils. If you're lucky, they'll even pay in full. When business is slow, you'll find yourself perched near the entrance, perfecting that "I'm approachable but dead inside" look while calling out to passers-by. Marketing here is all about volume. Special today, 2 coins, and I'll pretend to care about your toga. There's no fancy signage, but the graffiti on the walls does the trick. Ancient Yelp reviews carved with enthusiasm and questionable spelling. Felix was here twice, or Tyus gives a good time, alongside stick figure art that's more optimistic than accurate. Confidence, at least, never goes out of style. Is it glamorous? No. But it's consistent. You've got a roof over your head, a bed if you use your imagination, and a front row seat to Rome's weirdest nightly parade. If you're into people watching, congratulations, you're living the dream. Of course, not every Roman prostitute clocks in at the Lupinar. Some are assigned or choose the equally intoxicating world of the tavern. Think of it as the Roman version of a startup, open architecture, questionable legality, and the constant risk of someone vomiting on your shoes. Here, the air is thick with the aroma of spilled wine, overcooked cabbage, fish sauce, and the kind of body odor that could fell a small ox. Welcome to Culpone and Popine, where Rome's finest drunks, hustlers, and off-duty gladiators gather to lose coins, and occasionally their dignity. Your role in the tavern is multitasking at its finest. Serve the watered-down wine with one hand, fend off grabby patrons with the other, and keep the conversation just flirty enough to encourage tips, but not so suggestive that a brawl breaks out, unless that brawl is entertaining, in which case, pour another round. Taverns are technically food establishments, so you're surrounded by the comforting scent of boiled vegetables and regret. Upselling is an art form. For 2 more coins, I'll pretend not to notice you smell of garum. Some women work the back rooms or upstairs alcoves, transforming the tavern into a part-time brothel with table service. Others keep it casual, offering company, lap-sitting, and the occasional, "Your toga looks suspiciously clean." which, in Rome, passes for high praise. Payment is always upfront, credit is a fantasy, and if someone tries to walk without paying, you're empowered to shout, threaten, or summon the bouncer. Picture a retired gladiator with one eye, a short temper, and a personal policy of no refunds. The upside? Taverns promise more foot traffic, better odds for tips, and the occasional client with enough coins to actually pay. The downside? You're simultaneously a waitress, therapist, and crisis negotiator, and emotional labor is never on the menu. The soundtrack is relentless, dice clattering, drunken arguments about Virgil, and the background hum of someone losing at liar's dice. If the customers don't pass out on your table or mistake you for a coat rack, it's a good night. But perhaps you're the entrepreneurial type, brimming with confidence and a strong sense of self-preservation. Maybe management isn't your thing. In that case, welcome to the world of street-level freelance. You're now a prostibuler, the independent contractor of ancient Rome, walking the line between free agent and please don't arrest me. The city is your office, alleys, bathhouse steps, marketplaces, and, if you're feeling bold, the shadow of a temple. Nothing says blessed, like offering a discount outside Venus's shrine. Street work has its own rhythm. Daytime hours mean more customers, but also more gawkers, nosy magistrates, and the occasional matron glaring at you as if your existence single-handedly ruined her husband's self-control. Spoiler alert, it didn't. To stand out, you dress for maximum visibility. Short tunics, bright sashes, enough jewelry to double as a wind chime, and sometimes a wig made from imported German hair. Subtlety is not your brand. You need to catch a client's eye before his wife catches him. Approaching a customer involves a delicate dance, flirting, timing, and making sure you're not mistaken for someone's runaway house slave. You toss out a compliment about his sandals, slip in your rate, and keep an eye on the local vigiles, Rome's answer to neighborhood watch and parking enforcement combined. Some clients are polite, some are cheap, and a select few are just confused and need directions to the nearest bath. You learn to read the signs, eye contact, coin jingling, or a toga that's been hastily rewrapped. Competition is everywhere. You're not just up against your fellow prostibulae, but also bored party girls, free lovers, and the occasional ex-gladiator with a side hustle. Security? Sometimes you carry a knife, sometimes you rely on a friendly tavern bouncer, and sometimes you just run very fast in sandals. Benefits? You set your own hours, keep your own earnings, and don't have to listen to a Leno's motivational speeches. Downsides include the occasional drunken goat and philosophers who pay in compliments. But you're your own boss, and in Rome, bosses are rarely the heroes of the story. Now, if you thought job satisfaction peaked with not being stabbed, let me introduce Rome's least beloved client, the tax collector. Yes, even in the world's first gig economy, big government wants its share. Enter the vectigal ex captaris, the prostitute tax. Every awkward encounter, every long shift, contributes not just to your wallet, but to Rome's public infrastructure. Congratulations, your services just paid for another stretch of aqueduct. Maybe they'll name a fountain after you. This isn't a back alley shakedown either. The Roman state runs this scheme with chilling efficiency. Professional tax collectors, known as publicani, keep meticulous records, demand payment up front, and probably judge your perfume while doing it. In order to work legally, you must register with the aediles, the Roman equivalent of city inspectors, but with more paperwork and less patience. Once registered, you're on the official list of sex workers. Think of it as a trade union, minus the health plan or dental. Instead of a membership card, some workers, especially enslaved women, are branded or tattooed with words like lupa or, more humiliating still, their owner's name. The branding isn't for the client's benefit. It's to ensure you never sneak your way back into respectable society. Let's talk about the tax rate. It varies by neighborhood, clientele, and whether your customers are sad senators or discount gladiators. Sometimes you pay per transaction, sometimes per week, depending on which city official is running the show. There are no deductions for emotional exhaustion, awkward silences, or listening to a senator's thoughts on stoicism. Refusing to pay. That can mean fines, arrest, or losing your right to work. Though, as with any bureaucracy, enforcement is inconsistent if you know which official to bribe or how to flirt with the aedile on duty. As if the stigma wasn't enough, Rome manages to be both judgmental and greedy. We disapprove of your lifestyle. Also, hand over 10%. On the bright side, you can take pride in knowing your labor is funding another temple, probably dedicated to a goddess who's never answered your prayers. In Rome, being a prostitute means you're both legally permitted and socially condemned. The law recognizes your existence, demands its cut, and registers your name in the city annals. But that doesn't stop every senator, priest, and armchair philosopher from judging you, often while making use of your services. The moral police aren't an official department, but a vast, unpaid network made up of senators, priests, matrons, and the kind of writers who haven't been invited to a party since the reign of Augustus. At the top of this hypocrisy, pyramid sits the Roman Senate, a collection of elderly men with a fondness for public virtue, which they define as whatever they haven't been caught doing this week. They love to rail against moral decay, all while maintaining discreet tabs at the city's best brothels. Next come the aediles, Rome's actual public officials for cleanliness, order, and decency. Their job is to inspect brothels, hand out fines, and occasionally penalize women for being too obvious about their profession, which, let's remember, the law requires them to be. You couldn't blend in if you tried. Writers like Juvenal and Seneca have a field day with you, lumping prostitutes in with greedy merchants, loud women, and the truly scandalous women who read. Yet, somehow, their poems and plays are filled with suspiciously detailed brothel scenes. Academic research, surely. Respectable matrons, those paragons of virtue, join in the chorus of judgment too. They won't speak to you, heaven forbid, but they'll pass your corner with a glare cold enough to curdle milk. Some even campaign for laws banning prostitutes from wearing jewelry or entering the public baths, which is rich coming from women whose husbands treat the baths as a second home. Day after day, you walk the tightrope of legal tolerance and social contempt. You exist in Rome's gray zone, registered, taxed, and very much needed, but never quite welcome. The reality is harsh, but you learn to survive. You become an expert in reading people, dodging insults, and finding humor in the everyday chaos. You master the art of the withering stare, the quick exit, and the ability to laugh at a senator's joke without rolling your eyes. You know all the shortcuts home and which bathhouses have the best gossip. And at the end of the day, you find a kind of pride in the fact that, despite everything, despite the branding, the taxes, the side-eye from matrons, Rome's grand machine doesn't run without you. Speaking of survival, let's talk about the real occupational hazards. Because working as a Roman prostitute came with certain risks, some obvious, some less so. Disease, injury, and whatever that thing was, the sailor from Brundisium left behind. But more on that in our next orientation segment. Welcome to the Health and Wellness, onboarding for Roman sex work, where preventative care means dodging disease, ducking judgment, and hoping that weird rash is just a temporary side effect and not the universe's way of telling you to rethink your life choices. Step right up, grab your complimentary bottle of vinegar and a prayer to Venus, because occupational hazards aren't just probable. They're practically part of the benefits package. Let's tackle the most infamous workplace hazard first. No, not your boss's breath, but venereal disease. The Romans didn't know about bacteria or viruses, but they definitely noticed that some clients left more behind than a few cestices and a half-hearted compliment about your eyes. Ancient medical texts, penned by men who'd never set foot in a brothel, but loved to speculate, described symptoms ranging from relentless itching to, well, parts falling off that were supposed to stay attached. The official HR advice? Try a vinegar wash, slap on some herbal ointment, and hope Venus is in a generous mood tonight. That's right. Your health insurance consists of pantry staples and desperate prayers. Now, let's talk about the next chronic workplace concern, pregnancy. Sorry, no company-sponsored birth control here. Your options are a little DIY and a lot risky. There was silphium, a miracle plant so effective at preventing pregnancy that it was harvested into extinction, literally wiped off the face of the earth by demand from folks just like you. If you couldn't get your hands on that, you might improvise with animal intestines for crude condoms, or fashion wool tampons soaked in herbal potions that promised results somewhere between, maybe, and miraculous intervention. The success rate? Let's just say it kept hope alive, but not always your long-term career goals. If you did get pregnant, things got complicated fast. Some women carried their babies to term, raising them inside the brothel, because childcare and the workplace were one and the same. Others left infants at foundling homes, or in some cases, on the city streets, where Roman society looked the other way, with a sort of civic shrug. Infanticide wasn't technically legal, but ignoring it was about as Roman as complaining about taxes. Day-to-day aches and pains came with their own grab bag of remedies. Sore from a long shift? Try some wine. A pinch of opium, or a not-so-gentle pep talk from your brothel manager. Think of it as the ancient world's version of walk it off. If that didn't work, you could always spend the night at a temple dedicated to Asclepius, the god of healing, curled up on a cold floor, hoping the gods sent you a restorative dream instead of just another cramp. Ancient wellness wasn't exactly a luxury retreat. It was more like a mystical sleepover with a side of incense and a strong chance of disappointment. Hygiene? Let's just say ambitious is the polite term. No gloves, no antiseptics, and definitely no hand washing before anyone put their hands anywhere. Infections were as common as gossip. You learned to live with a certain, shall we say, fragrance, something between wine, sweat, incense, and the faint whiff of ongoing regret. But the worst injuries weren't physical. The emotional toll was heavy. The kind of thing modern HR departments would call a high-stress environment. Depression, trauma, and anxiety were part of the job. Rome didn't offer therapists, of course, but you did have other resources, fellow workers who'd seen it all, a jug of wine, and maybe a scruffy stray cat who listened without interrupting. Now, let's not overlook the spiritual side of your wellness plan. In Rome, religion was less a matter of personal conviction and more like being on call for divine HR, with a roster of gods who always seemed to be judging your performance review. Prostitutes, being the savvy employees they were, kept their altars ready and their offerings creative. Venus, the goddess of love and questionable decisions, got top billing. Maybe you'd leave her flowers, a dab of imported perfume, or just a shiny coin, hoping she'd send you a client who was both generous and didn't smell of boiled cabbage. Fortuna, the goddess of luck, was basically your 401k plan. Since your nightly earnings could swing from a gold earring to a handful of moldy grapes and a vague promise, you'd wear her charm or whisper a quick prayer whenever a client walked in with too many rings and suspiciously clean hands. But the Roman gods were a mixed bag. Sometimes they offered hope and comfort. Other times it was all curses, omens, and magical countermeasures. You'd burn incense to ward off the evil eye, tie a red string around your ankle for protection. Or, if you were especially serious about workplace rivalry, hire a local witch to curse the hairline of your competition. And this wasn't just superstition. Archaeologists have found hundreds of cursed tablets littered across ancient brothel districts, many reading like one-star Yelp reviews written in Latin. May her clients dry up. May she trip and land in donkey dung. Customer service, Roman style. If you happen to be enslaved, Mercury, god of commerce, messages, and creative accounting, got his own slice of your spiritual budget. You might even light a candle to Libertas, the goddess of freedom, if you were saving up to buy your way out of the business. The gods were your ultimate HR department, mostly indifferent, occasionally helpful, and always accepting bribes. Let's move on to the subject of love, because nothing says workplace complication like a client who confuses a service for a soulmate. Love in the Roman brothel was complicated, to put it gently. Some clients fell in love, at least they claimed to, usually after a few cups of wine and a dramatic retelling of how their mother never understood them. But you're different, they'd insist, clutching your hand with a tragic look. You'd smile, nod, and mentally calculate how many more coins they still owed you. Sometimes workers reciprocated those feelings, or at least pretended to. Emotional labor was just another job requirement. Smile, listen, pretend his toga doesn't smell like last week's despair. For a handful of clients, a kind of real attachment might grow. Affection, camaraderie, or just exhaustion from the same old routine. But for most, romance was a dangerous distraction, especially considering Roman law officially labeled you as infamous, meaning you couldn't legally marry a citizen, no matter how many love poems he wrote, or how many promises he made about a villa in the countryside. Still, people tried. There are stories of prostitutes who fell for their regulars, who were promised freedom, marriage, and a house with a garden, only to be abandoned the moment a younger woman with better eyeliner strolled by. On the flip side, there were clients who genuinely adored their favorite companion, showering her with gifts and, on rare occasions, the ultimate gesture, manumission, or legal freedom if she was enslaved. But these were rare exceptions, not the rule. Real bonds, the ones that lasted, were usually forged between co-workers. You worked shoulder to shoulder, endured the same insults, and shared the same lies. Some friendships became closer, a kind of sisterhood forged in adversity. Others grew into quiet romantic partnerships, hidden from Roman patriarchy, which stubbornly believed women couldn't love anyone except men with impressive sword collections. And always, there were the lies you told yourself. That you'd save enough to leave one day. That your favorite client really would come back. That, with a little luck, you'd open a perfume shop in Ostia and never look back. Maybe these dreams weren't true, but in Rome, everyone needed a fantasy just to get through the week. Yours just happened to involve better lighting and lower expectations. Now, let's address the workplace reality that no one likes to talk about: aging out. In the Roman economy of looks, youth was your biggest asset, and time was your least forgiving creditor. When the blush faded, clients moved on, and your knees started popping louder than your earrings, you didn't disappear. You adapted. Some women, through careful saving, or the rare client with a generous soul and a functioning memory, managed to buy their freedom and start fresh. The luckiest opened taverns or bathhouses, renting rooms to the next generation. Others became madams or lenas, the ancient equivalent of upper management, less action, more shouting. As a lena, you didn't need to be young or beautiful. You needed to be sharp, intimidating, and fluent in threats involving sandals and overdue payments. You ran the schedules, kept the books, and ensured that curtains were only mildly horrifying. Clients feared you, workers pretended to respect you, and city officials sighed when they saw you coming. Other retirees leaned into fortune-telling. When you've heard every confession and watched every bad decision walk through your door, predicting doom becomes second nature. Some became unofficial therapists, wise women or herbalists, dispensing advice laced with sarcasm and a dash of medical inaccuracy. But many just kept working, because Rome didn't offer pensions to women who'd spent 2 decades in a toga. Older prostitutes still had clients. They just adjusted their branding. Less blushing ingenue, more experienced, discreet, and immune to bad poetry. Appearance still mattered, but reputation mattered more. A woman known for good conversation, kindness, or astonishingly accurate astrology readings could remain in demand long after her 20s. For those with no savings, no patrons, and no lucky breaks, the options were harsh. You might end up begging, cleaning temples, or working until your hands looked like shriveled olives. Rome didn't care how you aged, only that you did so quietly. But here's the unspoken achievement. They never carved into marble. Survival. If you made it to old age with your wit intact and at least one sandal that hadn't been stolen, you were already a legend. It was a kind of legacy, one Rome never celebrated, but which your fellow workers recognized with a nod and a sly smile. So, what does the world remember about you and your colleagues? When people picture ancient Rome, it's all marble statues, orators waving their arms, and emperors with questionable hobbies. They rarely imagine the woman leaning in a shadowed doorway, adjusting her wig, and mentally calculating whether tonight's earnings will keep her from starving next week. Roman prostitutes didn't just operate in the shadows. They've been kept there by history, conveniently edited out so school children could learn about aqueducts without awkward questions. Yet, you were everywhere, carved into graffiti, named in legal records, mentioned in satirical poems, love letters, curse tablets, and, yes, receipts, actual receipts. Because even in the oldest profession, someone has to balance the books. You were a fixture of Roman daily life, as essential to the city's rhythm as bakers, gladiators, and the guy who sold questionable sausages at the market. What history usually gets wrong is the idea that these women were either helpless victims or conniving seductresses. In reality, most were savvy, adaptable, and frankly, better at business than half the senators. You learn to read a client, negotiate a fair price, avoid danger, and hustle a living in a city that cheered for gladiators and threw stones at anyone with the wrong shoes. You weren't all the same either. Some were enslaved, some were free, some catered to the wealthy, others to whoever could scrape together 2 coins and a compliment. Some hated every minute, others carved out small corners of power, dignity, and routine. Most existed somewhere in between, doing their best to hide how tired they were. Their stories weren't written by them, but by poets, moralists, and, much later, archaeologists deciphering Pompeii's raciest wall scribbles. But even if you were erased from respectability, you were never wiped from reality. You lived, you laughed, you survived, and sometimes you even thrived, all without marble statues or golden tombs, just a bit of ink on a crumbling wall. Maritima was here, and worth every coin. So next time someone starts waxing poetic about the glory of Rome, remind them, behind every toga-clad philosopher was a working woman keeping the economy and the city's gossip humming. And while Roman healthcare might make you grateful for modern hand sanitizer, things didn't get much easier in the centuries that followed. Let's fast forward to a world of colder winds, sharper axes, and a very different approach to wellness. In the world of the Vikings, warfare was a constant presence, and with it came injuries, deep cuts from swords, axe wounds, broken bones, and burns from fire and frost. Picture yourself in a Viking settlement, where the comforting lullaby of nightly rain sounds for sleep is replaced by something a little more dramatic, the clanging of steel, the groans of the wounded, and the not-so-distant threat of frostbite. Here, warfare isn't just a page from weird history or a background for bedtime stories. It's your performance review, every season, sometimes every week, and it's not exactly a work-from-home setup. Swords slice, axes thud, bones crack and flames lick at everything you own. The battlefield and the village both double as your open office, and the role of the healer, or lechneya, is less a cushy medical desk job and more a non-stop triage marathon with a side order of spiritual HR duties. So, congratulations. You're now onboarding as a Viking healer. Your daily grind? Wrangling wounds, managing infections, and occasionally explaining to your clients why your benefits package doesn't include anesthetic. But don't worry, your toolkit is a mix of practical wisdom and Norse cosmology, so you get to blend evidence-based medicine with a dash of the divine. And while you won't find your supplies listed on Amazon Prime, you do have access to the all-stars of the ancient apothecary, yarrow, angelica, and birch. Let's get you acquainted with your new core competencies. First up on your herbal CV is yarrow, Achillea milfolium, if you want to impress at the next Healers Conference. In the Viking world, yarrow is your go-to brand for controlling bleeding. Think of it as the duct tape of the north, only slightly more fragrant. Growing wild in meadows, along riverbanks, or carefully tended in household gardens, yarrow is everywhere you need it to be. When someone staggers in with a fresh sword cut, blood pooling, skin flapping, that look of, "Is this covered under my plan?" You grab a handful of yarrow leaves and get to work. You crush the leaves to a pulp, apply it straight to the wound, and bind it up tightly with linen strips or, in a pinch, whatever animal hide you can scrounge from the laundry pile. But don't start thinking this is just a medieval band-aid. Yarrow does more than stop the red stuff from leaking out. It's a coagulant, helping blood to clot, and, with any luck, keeping infection at bay. And, naturally, there are layers of workplace ritual involved. The healer might wash the wound first with boiled water that's been steeped with whatever antiseptic herbs are on hand. Think of it as the Viking version of sanitizing your workstation. Then, as you're binding everything up, you may recite a chant or murmur a prayer, calling for Odin's favor or the gods' protection. Because in this office, healing is never just about patching up the physical. You're also expected to handle the spiritual side of HR, making sure your patient's soul is on the mend too. Yarrow isn't just for battlefield drama either. Your clients might drop by with a fever, a bout of indigestion, or the kind of menstrual cramps that could topple a berserker. For these complaints, you shift gears and brew a tea from the plant's flowers and leaves. The taste? Let's call it earthy with a side of. You get used to it. But it works, easing pain, reducing fever, and settling stomachs. In a world where over-the-counter means out the back door and into the hedgerow, yarrow's versatility is your best employee benefit. Now, here's where your training starts to sound less like medical school and more like onboarding at a mystical startup. Knowledge of herbs and remedies isn't written down in neat manuals. It's passed down through whispered instructions, mother to daughter, elder to apprentice. You learn what to gather in spring, what to dry for the dark months when sunlight is just a rumor. You memorize which patch of ground yields the strongest yarrow and how to store it so it doesn't turn into a moldy science project by February. Your expertise isn't just valued. It's essential for survival and for maintaining the strength of an entire warrior-driven company culture. But let's be honest, stopping bleeding is only half the battle. Infection is your real workplace nemesis. Enter Angelica Archangelica, the next star on your herbal performance review. Angelica is a tall, dramatic plant with hollow stems and umbels of greenish-white flowers, thriving in the cold, gloomy corners of Scandinavia. It's so respected that, long after the Viking HR department closed shop, Angelica still held pride of place in monastery gardens. You use every part of the plant, roots, leaves, seeds, like a true zero-waste enthusiast. Your main tactic? Dry the root, then steep it into a strong, aromatic decoction. When you've got a wound that's definitely not healing the way it should, think festering, foul-smelling, and clearly not in line with the company mission statement, you grind up the root, mix it with animal fat or beeswax, and apply that salve directly to the infection. Angelica's warming effect helps to stimulate circulation, cleanse the blood, and reduce inflammation, which is your only hope when antibiotics are just a distant dream. Internally, you serve it as a tea or tincture for a host of workplace hazards, respiratory infections, fevers, digestive meltdowns, the kind of ailments that might keep your best warriors off the payroll for weeks. And in Viking HR, absenteeism due to plague is definitely frowned upon. But Angelica comes with a serious bonus: spiritual hazard pay. In Norse cosmology, certain plants are considered divine gifts. Even the name Angelica, though imported from Latin, echoes the sense of sacred power. In Christianized Europe, legend claims an angel revealed it as a cure for the plague. Vikings had their own take, seeing strong, scented, striking plants like Angelica as direct blessings from the gods. So, when you burn Angelica in a smoky ritual to cleanse a sick room or safeguard a newborn, you're not just fighting germs, you're managing spiritual risk and doing a bit of preventative PR. Let's not forget, much of the day-to-day herbal work falls to women who serve as household herbalists and midwives. Angelica is a trusted remedy for regulating menstrual cycles and easing childbirth, which in Viking society comes with all the danger and sacred awe of a high-stakes product launch. When infection sweeps through the community, you reach for Angelica to purify both the body and the home, burning it as incense to drive out whatever malevolent forces might be lurking, whether they're viral or supernatural. In every Viking settlement, whether it's a lonely farmstead facing the North Sea or a bustling trade post, Angelica is a cornerstone of your medical practice. With it, you're not just patching up wounds, you're keeping the whole system running, physically and spiritually, through one harsh season after another. Think of it as your company's 401k plan, only slightly less reliable, but much more aromatic. Now, as the frozen grip of winter finally loosens and spring tiptoes across the landscape, you get a brief annual bonus: birch sap. The birch tree, with its pale, papery bark and reputation for outlasting almost anything, is the original symbol of renewal in the North. But you're not here for symbolism. You're here for that sweet, clear sap that rises up from the roots just as the snow melts. Tapping a birch tree is a precise operation, with a window of opportunity that's shorter than most Viking tempers. Too early, and you get nothing. Too late, and the sap is gone. The tree fully awake and busy doing its own thing. When you do get it right, you collect the sap, cool, delicately sweet, and brimming with minerals and electrolytes. It's your go-to tonic for anyone who's been knocked flat by a winter fever, a lingering sickness, or just the cumulative exhaustion of surviving another year in a climate that's actively trying to kill you. Fresh birch sap is served straight up, or, if you're feeling fancy, you ferment it into a lightly alcoholic beverage that's part medicine, part morale booster. In an age before anyone invents Red Bull, this is your best shot at restoring energy and hydration. If you're treating a fever, pairing birch sap with cooling herbs like meadow or elderflower helps bring down body temperature and soothe the patient. For more stubborn cases, you might blend it with something bitter, wormwood perhaps, to purge the body of whatever bad humors are believed to be lurking inside. It's a simple logic: cleanse, restore, rebalance. Repeat as necessary. Birch is more than just sap, of course. The bark, when boiled and reduced, gives you a sticky, tar-like substance with serious antiseptic properties. Perfect for treating skin infections, minor burns, or the occasional bud bite that could otherwise spiral into a medieval HR complaint. The leaves, too, get their time to shine, used in poultices and steam baths to draw out toxins and realign the physical with the spiritual, often accompanied by a little ceremony or whispered prayer to keep the gods on your side. There's a reason birch is sacred in both Germanic and Norse traditions. After fire or disaster clears the land, it's almost always the first tree to come back, stubbornly putting down roots where nothing else will. That regenerative spirit is reflected in your use of its sap, a clear, life-giving elixir that marks the turning of the year and proves, yet again, that even in the harshest environment, renewal is always possible. So, as you wrap up your orientation in the Viking healer's office, you can take some pride in your new role. You're not just doling out ancient remedies. You're running the original wellness startup, balancing practical medicine, spiritual management, and just enough ritual to keep everyone convinced you've got a direct line to the gods. And if your workplace smells faintly of yarrow, angelica, birch, and the perpetual anxiety of surviving another winter, well, that's just the price of doing business in the north. But don't hang up your herbal toolkit just yet. Purification and pain relief are next on your agenda, and your next onboarding assignment is about to introduce you to the powerful world of juniper, meadow, and mugwort. In Viking herbal medicine, juniper was revered for its powerful cleansing properties, both physical and spiritual. Time to cleanse, protect, and maybe, just maybe, catch your breath. Welcome to the Viking Healer's Wellness Program, where you'll experience purification, pain relief, and just a dash of mystical protection. Your workplace. Think less sterile hospital and more smoky longhouse that smells faintly of pine, sweat, and the existential dread of winter. The first tool you'll be issued is juniper. You might know it today as the thing that makes your cheap gin taste like a Christmas tree. But for the Vikings, juniper was less about cocktails and more about survival and spiritual cleanliness. Juniper, with its spiky green needles and pungent blueberries, didn't just grow wild among the Scandinavian rocks. It practically camped out on your doorstep, daring you to ignore its sharp personality. You, as the healer, are expected to know every part of it. When things start to get, let's say, unhygienic. Around the workplace, someone's coughing in the corner. The communal sleeping furs haven't been washed since Ragnar's last bad decision, and the air is thick with suspicion. Juniper is your go-to. No pressure, but your colleagues are counting on you to keep the plague out and the ancestors appeased. So, here's how you wield your ancient air freshener. Start by snapping a few branches and tossing them onto the coals in the center of the room. The air fills instantly with a sharp, piney smoke that stings the eyes and clears the sinuses. In modern terms, it's like running a vaporizer, only with more risk of setting your beard on fire. The smoke isn't just for show. Juniper's essential oils have real antimicrobial effects, which means you're not just waving away evil spirits, you're actually disinfecting the air. It's history's answer to a can of Lysol, though considerably better for your branding as a mystical healer. This ritual cleansing wasn't just for sick rooms either. Whenever a death struck the household, or an ominous illness swept through the village, you'd see juniper smoke curling out of every doorway. It's part spiritual insurance policy, part workplace deep clean. And let's not forget the steam baths, the true Viking spa experience. Picture yourself in a smoky, dim-lit hut, sweat running down your forehead. Juniper branches are scattered over the hot stones, filling every breath you take with that brisk, invigorating scent. Your pores open, your muscles relax, and for a moment you forget. You live in a world where your work uniform is mostly wool and anxiety. Juniper isn't just a room deodorizer with a superiority complex. The berries themselves come into play for internal purification. When your fellow Vikings are swollen from infection or weighed down by a particularly robust winter meal, you'll be brewing up juniper berry tea. The taste is strong, bordering on medicinal, but your patients will thank you when the swelling goes down and the fevers break. The berries ramp up kidney function, helping the body flush out whatever ill humor or actual infection is lurking inside. In an era with no real antibiotics, this is about as close as you'll get to a miracle drug. Juniper also gets a starring role in the world of symbolic gestures. Hang a bundle over the entrance to keep out bad luck and wandering spirits. Travelers tuck a sprig in their belts like a medieval version of a lucky rabbit's foot. Every time you pass through a doorway, you're being subtly reminded you are protected, you are cleansed, and yes, your office still smells like a forest after a rainstorm. But let's not get too comfortable in the foliage. Next on your orientation checklist is Meadow, the dependable, unassuming MVP of the healer's toolkit. Officially known as meadowsweet, this plant makes its home in the soggy meadows and riverbanks that dot the northern landscape. The flowers are delicate, creamy white, and radiate a scent that's somewhere between honey and fresh-cut grass. In the world of Viking health benefits, this is your pain management package. You'll find yourself reaching for meadowsweet whenever someone staggers in, rubbing their temples, joints, or stomach. Headaches, fevers, and the kind of aches that come from wrestling sheep in the rain, these are all in a day's work. Strip the flowers and leaves, dry them, and steep them into a tea. The resulting brew soothes fevers, calms upset stomachs, and takes the edge off whatever fresh misery the climate has served up. The Vikings didn't know why it worked, but modern history reveals meadowsweet is loaded with natural compounds, similar to salicylic acid. the very thing that powers your grandma's aspirin. So, without a degree in chemistry, you're now an early adopter of pain relief technology. You'll notice that the use of meadowsweet is as much about comfort as it is about science. The scent alone brings a sense of calm to the sick room, almost like someone lit a scented candle on a dreary Monday morning. It's the healer's way of saying, "I see your suffering, and I raise you 1 cup of warm, fragrant tea." During the long, dark winters, when joints ache and fevers linger, this gentle remedy is a small mercy. Meadowsweet isn't just for physical pain. You'll also see it woven into rituals meant to guide souls through the transitions of life and death. Flowers are placed near the ill, tucked into burial shrouds, or scattered on graves to ensure a peaceful journey to the afterlife. Some sagas claim these sweet-smelling plants are gifts from the gods, a divine care package for mortals stuck in the mud and mess of daily life. It's a reminder that healing for the Vikings was never just about the body. It was about restoring harmony, whether you were fighting off a fever or facing down the unknown. Now, just when you think your herbal training can't get any stranger, enter mugwort, the overachiever of the Viking medicine cabinet. Officially called Artemisia vulgaris, mugwort is as bitter as it is mysterious, with silvery leaves that seem to shimmer in the half-light. If juniper is your disinfectant and meadowsweet your painkiller, mugwort is your HR-approved bridge to the spirit world. Welcome to the magical side of your employee handbook. In the realm of practical medicine, mugwort is a multitasker's dream. Brewed as a tea, it soothes digestive issues, calms menstrual cramps, and bolsters a tired liver. Viking women, in particular, depend on you to measure mugwort carefully. Too little, and it's useless. Too much, and you might get the side effect of visions from the gods, which is not always covered by your workplace insurance. For childbirth and cycle regulation, mugwort is the best you've got in a world without modern obstetrics. Its nervine properties make it a secret weapon for calming warriors who can't sleep after a night of battle or a week of bad dreams. Brew a mug of mugwort tea, or burn it gently beside the bedside, and insomnia retreats just enough for a few hours of precious sleep. But mugwort's true calling is in the world of magic and ritual. As the healer, you're not just a pharmacist, you're a spiritual consultant, expected to navigate the invisible currents of fate and misfortune. When it's time for a solstice ceremony, a coming-of-age rite, or a bout of family drama that only the gods can fix, mugwort gets center stage. You burn it during Cedar, the Norse trance rituals, sending up fragrant smoke as an offering or a shield. The aroma is bitter, sharp, and unmistakably otherworldly. It's believed to carry prayers to the gods and warnings to spirits who might be lurking a little too close for comfort. You'll also be tasked with practical deployment. Hang mugwort bundles over doorways, tuck sprigs into travelers' pouches, or lay branches on the body during healing sessions. Its scent marks the threshold between the everyday and the sacred, the known and the unknown. For a healer, mugwort is the plant you reach for when physical remedies aren't enough, when the soul needs a nudge back into alignment with the world, the ancestors, or maybe just the next morning. So, as you settle into your role, remember, purification and pain relief aren't just about what you can see or touch. In Viking history, the line between medicine and magic is thin, and you're expected to straddle it, one hand on a bundle of juniper, the other on a cup of meadowsweet tea, and an eye on that ever-present mugwort hanging above the door. And speaking of powerful allies, your onboarding isn't over yet. Up next, you'll be learning about the Viking healer's take on endurance and legacy, featuring garlic, the original superfood, and nettle, the plant that bites back. These humble herbs earned their reputations as legends in the history of weird history. Congratulations, new recruit. You survived your first week on the Viking healer team. No small feat, considering your onboarding package featured an herbal starter kit that could double as a hazardous materials sampler. Now, let's take a closer look at two of your most essential and, let's be honest, most pungent co-workers, garlic and nettle. Think of garlic as your all-in-one disinfectant, immune booster, and spiritual bodyguard. And nettle? That's your go-to for when you need to put the pain in pain relief, and then, miraculously, take it out again. Now, garlic didn't actually originate in the frozen soils of Scandinavia, long before the days of Viking import-export managers. This little bulb had already made a name for itself, along the trade routes snaking out of the British Isles, the Frankish lands, and even far-off eastern markets. The moment it arrived, garlic quickly established itself as a must-have item in the healer's toolkit. If you're picturing a Viking version of Whole Foods, just with a lot more axes and a lot less kale, you're on the right track. You'll notice garlic by its scent, a smell so strong it could clear out a longhouse faster than a tax collector. That's not just a bonus feature. In a world where infection lurked behind every splinter, garlic's sharp aroma and fiery taste were the frontline defense. Viking healers had a simple, if slightly brutal, protocol. Crush the garlic, slap it on a wound, and hope the patient is too busy cursing the burning sensation to focus on their festering injury. Nobody pretended this was gentle care. If you're looking for bedside manner, you're about 1,000 years too early. But here's the thing. It actually worked. Garlic's antibacterial and antifungal properties, though not exactly explained in modern scientific terms, were well understood through trial, error, and a lot of colorful Norse swearing. Smeared onto cuts and scrapes, garlic would kill off the worst offenders in the microbial world. In an age when a stubbed toe could turn into a deadly infection, this was nothing short of miraculous. Internal applications were just as popular. If you caught a cold, or one of those mysterious fevers that swept through the winter-long darkness, you'd be handed a raw garlic clove or, for those with more discerning palates, a pungent paste, sometimes cut with honey to soften the blow. Sometimes the garlic was brewed into a nose-watering infusion. Think of it as the Viking equivalent of those trendy wellness shots you see in modern juice bars, except the aftertaste stuck with you for days. The medical logic was straightforward. Garlic purifies the blood, warms the body, and gives you a fighting chance when every cough is a potential death sentence. And let's be honest, nobody else in the longhouse wanted to sit too close once you'd had your daily dose, which probably helped prevent the spread of disease all on its own. It didn't stop there. Garlic was your first line of defense against parasites, the kind you picked up from livestock, undercooked food, or just the general filth that came with Viking open-plan living. A potent mix of garlic and vinegar would be administered, sometimes with a smile, sometimes with a grimace, to drive out intestinal worms. If you thought kombucha was hard to choke down, imagine this as your morning routine. But garlic wasn't just about keeping your guts and wounds in order. It doubled as a spiritual security system. Healers and household managers, yes, even in the Viking Age, someone had to think about risk mitigation, would braid garlic and hang it near doorways or above sleeping spaces. The idea was to ward off not only disease, but also evil spirits, bad luck, and whatever else might be lurking in the shadows. The original no solicitors sign, if you will. Before heading out on a raid or a particularly treacherous journey, some warriors made a point of consuming garlic as part of their prep routine. They believed its strength became their own, its fire giving them an edge against both visible enemies and whatever supernatural mayhem might be waiting. Garlic was more than a plant. It was a badge of endurance, a secret ingredient in the Viking Performance Review for anyone hoping to make it back home in one piece. But if garlic was the fiery, no-nonsense supervisor of the healer's pantry, nettle was the tough love mentor. Nobody asked for, but everyone needed. The stinging nettle, Urtica dioica, if you're updating your resume, was both a menace and a miracle. Thriving in the disturbed, rocky soils around meadows and settlements, it had a reputation for being as unforgiving as a Norse winter. But that's exactly why it was valued. Let's address the obvious. Brushing up against nettle stings. You learn this lesson once, usually as a barefoot child, and you remember it for the rest of your life. The sting, however, was just a preview. In the healer's hands, nettle transformed from enemy to ally. Its leaves and stems, bristling with tiny needles, hid a wealth of iron, calcium, and vitamin C. Nutrients you desperately need when your winter diet consists mostly of dried fish and stale bread. Viking healers, always on the lookout for ways to squeeze a little more life out of the landscape, gathered nettle in early spring when its leaves were most potent. They'd dry or cook the leaves to neutralize the sting, then brew them into infusions or broths. If you've ever choked down a green smoothie and told yourself it's good for you, you're channeling the same energy. Nettle tea was prescribed for fatigue, anemia, and that general sense of, I haven't seen the sun in 5 months, malaise that comes standard in the Norse workplace. Warriors coming home from a raid, bruised, battered, and in desperate need of employee wellness support, were often handed nettle drinks to rebuild their strength. Children laid up with fever, elders complaining of aching joints, anyone looking a little too pale, nettle was the answer. It was believed to purify the blood, get sluggish circulation moving, and flush out whatever unnamed toxins you'd accumulated during the long, smoky nights. Nettle's talents didn't end with gentle teas. Enter vertication, a practice that sounds suspiciously like something invented on a dare. Got a stiff joint or a limb that just won't cooperate? The healer grabs a fresh bundle of nettles and whacks the sore area until it burns. Yes, really. The logic was that the pain and irritation would shock the body into sending blood and warmth to the area, relieving stiffness and, if you squint, maybe even improving morale. If you think your company's wellness seminars are tough, imagine getting signed up for this without so much as a waiver. Beyond its medicinal uses, nettle was the ultimate multi-departmental asset. Its strong fibers were spun into rope, nets, and even rough cloth, especially when flax or wool supplies ran thin. In a society obsessed with resilience, nettle was the perfect symbol. Cut it down, burn it, trample it, and it just grows back, season after season. It was the plant that refused to quit, a fitting mascot for any Viking HR department. For Viking healers, every herb was more than just a tool. Garlic and nettle, in particular, carried a double meaning, both remedy and emblem. Garlic, with its fire and strength, stood for endurance, the ability to fight off whatever the world threw at you, whether microbe or malice. Nettle, with its sting and stubbornness, embodied resilience, the capacity to thrive in harsh conditions and come back stronger every time. Of course, none of this wisdom was written down in neat, leather-bound manuals. The Vikings were more oral tradition than employee handbook. Knowledge passed from mother to daughter, wise woman to apprentice, in stories, rituals, and the quiet, matter-of-fact business of keeping people alive through another winter. Chants, gestures, and the careful timing of gathering and drying. This was your professional development. If you were one of these healers, your job was more than mixing up brews and tending wounds. You were responsible for restoring balance, not just in the body, but in the household, the community, and even the cosmic order. Illness wasn't just a physical problem. It was often seen as a sign of fate gone askew, a test from the gods, or a disturbance in the delicate dance between the seen and unseen worlds. Women, especially, kept this knowledge alive. In the longhouse, the healer was the ultimate multitasker, nurse, spiritual advisor, and, occasionally, the person who could make even the surliest warrior drink his nettle tea without complaint. Some women became known as seers, voller, blending healing with prophecy, and stepping in during moments of crisis. Their toolkit included not just herbs, but rituals, sacred words, and appeals to the likes of Frigg, Air, or Freya. Healing was never just a day job. It was a calling, a bridge between the mundane and the mythic. With the arrival of Christianity and the slow retreat of the old gods, much of this knowledge faded or changed shape. Some of it ended up in monastic herb gardens, repackaged with a new label. Other traditions vanished, or became the stuff of whispers and superstition. Still, the echoes remain. You'll find traces of Viking herbal medicine in Scandinavian folk healing, in modern herbalist circles, in the renewed enthusiasm for ancestral wisdom that pops up every time someone Googles natural remedies for everything. The real legacy of the Viking healer isn't just in the plants themselves, but in the worldview they represent, that nature holds both danger and remedy, that healing is an art as much as a science, and that true wisdom often grows where you least expect it, sometimes under a pile of nettles, sometimes behind a braid of garlic, and sometimes in the hands of someone history forgot to put on the company masthead. So, as you hang up your apron, wash the garlic from your hands and try to ignore the nettle rash creeping up your arm. Remember, in the Viking workplace, survival was a team effort. Even the lowest herbs on the totem pole had their day to shine. Now, let's fast forward a few centuries. Our HR files are never really closed. By 1428, the political and military situation in France had worsened. But before we dive into the chaos of Joan's rise, Take a moment to appreciate the humble healer's contribution, endurance, resilience, and the eternal hope that tomorrow's wounds will sting just a little less. Let's set the scene. It's 1428 and France, your new workplace. If you're following along in our historical HR orientation, is in absolute chaos. Imagine your department has just lost most of its territory. All the good office snacks are gone, and your boss still hasn't received his official job title. The English have gobbled up northern France, and the city of Orléans is under siege. Picture the printer jam from hell, but with more arrows and far fewer functioning coffee machines. The Dauphin, Charles, is stuck in a sort of existential limbo, his claim to the throne looking shakier than last year's budget projections. Enter you, Joan of Arc, 16 years old, from the rural branch office in Domremy, and absolutely convinced that now is the time to update the company's mission statement. You pack your one set of clean clothes, men's, for security reasons, since the medieval workplace still frowns on women leading project teams, and head for the regional office at Vaucouleurs. There, you request a meeting with Commander Robert de Baudricourt, the sort of manager whose primary HR skill is laughing directly in your face. You announce you have a message for the king, courtesy of upper management. Let's call them the Celestial Board of Directors. Baudricourt and his team, seasoned veterans of the field, meet your proposal with polite disbelief. A teenage girl showing up with a pitch deck about divine guidance. That's not even in the standard onboarding manual. Your first attempt is met with laughter and a not-so-subtle suggestion to try your luck at the local convent instead. But if there's one thing you bring to this role, it's persistence. You come back. Again and again. Each time, you lay out your case with the sort of conviction usually reserved for auditors and doomsday prophets. The locals start talking. Maybe it's your reputation for piety. Maybe it's that you predicted a military disaster in Orléans before news even made it to town. An early example of real-time data analytics. Whatever it is, Baudricourt finally caves. He agrees to send you, disguised in men's clothes and with a small armed escort, all the way to Chinon to meet the Dauphin himself. Now, this is not your average commute. The journey to Chinon is more than 300 miles through enemy territory. You're dressed as a man, partly for safety, partly because there's no official HR policy on prophetic teenage girls in armor. You dodge bandits, English patrols, and more than a few skeptical glances. By the time you reach Chinon, you haven't so much entered the room as survived several rounds of the world's worst onboarding obstacle course. When you finally stand before Charles, the uncrowned Dauphin, you find yourself the subject of intense curiosity and suspicion. Think of it as the medieval version of a group interview, except the stakes are national survival, and the break room serves nothing but gruel. Charles, ever the cautious employer, decides to test you. He hides among his courtiers in plain clothes, hoping to catch you out. You walk straight up to him, despite never having seen his face, and address him directly. The room goes silent. Some say you reveal secrets no one outside his inner circle could possibly know. Maybe a private prayer, maybe that embarrassing incident with the chamber pot. Whatever it is, the court is stunned. But HR compliance is no joke, especially when divine visions are involved. Charles sends you to Poitiers, for a full theological audit. For weeks, you're grilled by panels of theologians, church officials, and moral auditors. They question your visions, your doctrine, your morality, and, in an especially medieval touch, your virginity. Apparently, the company's divine benefits package only covers virgins. You pass every test. Your answers are composed, your faith unwavering, and your intelligence, despite your lack of formal education, impresses even the most skeptical examiners. They find no heresy, no fraud, and plenty of charisma. The final HR report reads, "No red flags, assigns excellent potential for customer-facing roles. With the green light from upper management, you're assigned to the Relief of Orleans. But before you set out, you make a special request, a banner. Not just any banner, your very own branding asset, white, embroidered with Christ and the words Jesus Maria. You prefer the banner to the sword, you explain, because nothing says inspirational leadership like waving your own logo while charging into battle. You're also fitted with a custom suit of white armor, ideal for standing out on the battlefield and hiding the fact that you're a teenage girl. The sword you carry is a special order as well, discovered behind the altar at St. Catherine de Fierbois, because you don't just accept any off-the-shelf weapon from procurement. Now, let's talk about your first real performance review, the Siege of Orléans. It's spring, 1429. The city is one supply run away from total collapse. Morale is so low you can practically smell the despair. And, let's be honest, the hygiene in a besieged city leaves a lot to be desired. You arrive on April 29, riding a white horse, clad in gleaming armor, your banner held high. The city erupts. People cheer. Soldiers and civilians alike look at you as a miracle in the flesh, a medieval answer to a surprise employee bonus. You waste no time. Despite having zero formal military training, you speak with the authority of someone who's already drafted the victory email. You urge immediate action, pushing for an aggressive assault on the English positions. The French commanders, who have spent years ignoring unsolicited advice, are suddenly paying attention. Your confidence is contagious. You insist that your voices have promised victory, and you're so convincing that even the most skeptical officers start to believe you might actually have read the script for the next week. Battle begins. You're not content to sit in the back and issue memos. You ride directly into the thick of the fighting, banner aloft, often putting yourself in the most dangerous spots. Your courage is more than symbolic. It visibly changes the mood of the troops. They fight harder, with new determination, as if your presence has given them an unlimited supply of motivational posters and free snacks. During the assault on the fortress of Les Tourelles, you're wounded. An arrow to the shoulder, the kind of occupational hazard that never gets covered by insureds. You refuse to retreat. After getting the wound dressed, you return to the front, urging your soldiers forward. Your resilience becomes legendary. The French attack again and again, and on May 8, the English finally withdraw. The siege is lifted. Orléans is saved. This is not just a military victory. It's a seismic shift in national morale, a rare moment when an entire company's culture transforms overnight. The French, after years of losing ground, have finally landed a decisive win. Your role is impossible to ignore. You, a teenage peasant girl from the margins of society, have just led the turnaround of the century without the benefit of a single PowerPoint slide. With Orléans liberated, your mission shifts to something even bigger. The coronation of Charles at Reims. This isn't just about politics. It's about fulfilling a prophecy. Your voices have made it clear. Charles must be crowned king, and only at Reims, with the sacred oil, can his claim be made official. The problem is, Reims sits deep in enemy territory, controlled by the Burgundians, who are basically the rival company's regional managers. You insist that the path is clear. Your confidence is so strong that even the usually cautious Charles starts to believe the risk might be worth it. Momentum is on your side. Town after town surrenders without a fight. The legend of your success spreads faster than office gossip. Some say to resist you is to resist God. A pretty effective HR policy, if you can get it in writing. As the coronation journey unfolds, your army grows stronger. Morale soars. Your white armor and banner have become as recognizable as the company logo, and your presence at the head of the column gives the whole enterprise an aura of invincibility. By mid-July, you and Charles arrive at Reims. The city's leaders, after some nervous negotiation, open the gates. There's no battle, just an overwhelming sense of fate at work. On July 17, 1429, inside the vast echoing cathedral of Reims, Charles is crowned King Charles VII of France. You stand at his side, holding your banner high, your face illuminated by the colored light streaming through centuries-old stained glass. For you, this moment is the fulfillment of everything your voices promised. For the people, seeing you there, peasant's daughter, now kingmaker, is proof that the old order has been uprooted by something extraordinary. You have not just restored a king, you've rebranded an entire nation. Your rise, from overlooked outsider to celebrated leader, transforms the war from a tired squabble over territory into a spiritual crusade. The country feels, for the first time in years, as if it's fighting for more than land or taxes. They're fighting for a purpose, and you're at the center of it all. But as every HR manager knows, success breeds its own complications. With Charles wearing the crown, the court's political sharps start circling again. Some people question your ongoing influence. Now that the mission has been accomplished, do you still have a seat at the strategy meeting? The whispers begin. The very things that made you indispensable, your certainty, your outsider status, your divine branding, suddenly make you seem less like a team player and more like a wild card. You're not finished, though. The next objective on your list is Paris, still held by the English and their Burgundian allies. But you sense, perhaps for the first time, that your authority is starting to erode. The tides of office politics are shifting, and your once unquestioned mandate now faces new resistance. So, as the crowned king basks in the glow of victory, you're already looking to the next campaign, aware that your role may be changing, but your mission is far from complete. After the coronation at Reims, Joan of Arc pushed for a bold new objective, the liberation of Paris, still under English and Burgundian control. Picture yourself back in the thick of medieval France's most chaotic HR department, where job security is a myth, and employee appreciation is mostly reserved for statues centuries after you're gone. Joan of Arc, official title, divinely inspired military contractor, is about to discover that even the most dazzling workplace performance reviews can't save you when upper management gets cold feet. With the coronation at Reims behind her. Yes, that's Reims, not Rams, no matter what the locals slur after too much celebratory wine. Joan now has her sights set on Paris, and not for the shopping or the pastries. For her, capturing the capital isn't just another bullet point. It's a non-negotiable deliverable on her divine project plan. She's convinced that only by reclaiming Paris can she truly fulfill her mandate and close out France's centuries-long English problem ticket. Unfortunately, the new CEO, King Charles VII, just crowned with maximum pageantry, has suddenly developed a taste for corporate risk management. His advisors, those medieval equivalents of middle managers, are whispering about negotiation, truce, and maybe just letting the English keep the good cheese for a while. Joan, on the other hand, is all in. Delay, she argues, is just a productivity killer. The only thing worse than waiting, in her view, is giving the enemy time to update their LinkedIn profiles and strengthen their walls. Eventually, Charles signs off on an assault on Paris, but only after watering down the plans so much that even the most optimistic project manager would roll their eyes. The king provides a skeleton crew. Think of it as being told you can have a small but agile team, and then drags his heels so long that the element of surprise evaporates. Joan arrives outside Paris in September 1429, ready to get to work. The city, however, is ready for her. The English and their Burgundian buddies have their fortifications up, archers at the ready, and a general no-soliciting policy for would-be liberators. On September 8th, Joan leads her troops right up to the Porte Saint-Honoré, the main gate, bristling with defenses. As always, she's at the front with her battle banner, shouting encouragement and prayers, and generally embodying the kind of morale boost that would make any modern HR team jealous. The defenders unleash a barrage of arrows and rocks. Joan takes a crossbow bolt to the thigh, occupational hazard for the frontline visionary, but refuses to leave. She keeps urging her men forward, demonstrating that leading from the front can sometimes be a little too literal. But the odds are bad, and the king's half-hearted support means resources run short. Night falls, casualties mount, and Charles's commanders order retreat over Joan's very vocal objections. Imagine fighting a losing battle while your boss sends you passive-aggressive memos about budget constraints. The failed attack on Paris is more than just a tactical loss. It's the moment the boardroom begins to lose faith in their star consultant. Among the regular troops and the people, Joan's reputation still sparkles. For the bigwigs at court, though, the magic is starting to wear off. Charles is now in full CYA mode, keeping his distance from the woman who, just months earlier, had delivered him a throne. Political calculations, a deeply rooted fear of rocking the establishment, and a growing suspicion of Joan's unorthodox management style start to eclipse her earlier triumphs. But Joan? She's not about to update her resume or take a sabbatical. She keeps fighting, leading smaller campaigns, capturing a few towns at her own expense, literally funding military operations with crowdsourced donations from supporters. She's like the world's first crowd-funded general, minus the TED Talk. But with every new campaign, the writing on the wall grows clearer. The king's support is evaporating, and her circle of loyalists is shrinking. Still, Joan refuses to quit. She's convinced that her job is unfinished, and no amount of political backstabbing or dwindling PTO can change her mind. But somewhere in the background, the whispers of betrayal are getting louder. The next act is about to begin. Spring 1430. Joan's situation is about as stable as a medieval bakery's yeast supply. The king is focused on diplomacy, which, in this context, means doing nothing, while hoping the English get bored and leave. Joan, undeterred, heads to Compiègne to defend the town from the encroaching Burgundians. She arrives in May, hoping to rally the defenders, and maybe, just maybe, snatch another miracle from the jaws of defeat. But this time, the numbers just aren't there. The Burgundians, with English backing, have superior forces. On May the 23, Joan leads a daring sortie to disrupt the enemy lines, a classic last-ditch effort, if ever there was one. The French are pushed back, and Joan stays behind to cover the retreat. It's the workplace equivalent of volunteering to tidy up after everyone else has clocked out. As chaos reigns, the city gates slam shut too soon, trapping Joan and a handful of companions outside. Burgundian cavalry swoop in. Joan fights, but there's only so much you can do on the wrong side of a locked door. She's pulled from her horse and taken captive. The ultimate wrong place, wrong time moment. The news of her capture spreads like wildfire. The woman who had once seemed untouchable, who had lifted entire cities out of despair, is now a prisoner. Her career and her country's hopes suddenly in limbo. The Burgundians, ever the shrewd talent scouts, recognize Joan's value, not as a noble opponent, but as a high-value bargaining chip. They keep her for months, treating her more like a trophy than a person. Eventually, they make a deal with the English, selling Joan for a hefty sum, proof positive that even in the 15th century, it's all about who can pay the highest ransom. The English see Joan not just as a battlefield rival, but as a dangerous symbol. To them, she embodies everything that makes rebellion hard to suppress: faith, charisma, and a knack for inspiring the disgruntled masses. They're determined not just to defeat her, but to erase the very idea of her. While in captivity, Joan refuses to play the part of the broken prisoner. She attempts escape multiple times, once by leaping from a tower, breaking bones but refusing to be cowed. Even in chains, she demands to be treated as a noble prisoner of war, not a criminal. But the English have other ideas for her end-of-contract review. They're not content to keep her on ice. They want to destroy her reputation, her influence, and the dangerous notion that God might side with the underdog. Plans for her trial are already underway. After months in Burgundian limbo, Joan is shipped to Rouen, the English headquarters in Normandy. There, in January 1431, her ordeal begins, not as a soldier, but as a heretic. That label, in the medieval HR handbook, is worse than frequent sick days, and poor email etiquette combined. It means she can be executed by church law, stripped of every honor she's ever earned. The so-called trial is orchestrated by the English, but carried out by a hand-picked panel of pro-English French clergy, led by Bishop Pierre Cauchon. Let's just say, this is not the sort of performance review that ends with a pizza party. The aim isn't justice, it's character assassination. By painting Joan as a heretic, the English hope to retroactively delegitimize Charles VII's entire reign. Because if a heretic puts you on the throne, your royal credentials suddenly look a lot less shiny. Joan is thrown into a secular prison, guarded by men, a clear violation of church law, but no one's counting. She's denied legal counsel, threatened with torture, grilled for hours on end by some of the best educated minds in France. Still a teenager, she holds her own with a mix of humility, wit, and stubbornness that would make any modern HR manager's life interesting. She fields questions about her visions, her faith, and, most controversially, her wardrobe, specifically, her insistence on wearing men's clothing. The judges harp on this relentlessly, convinced that fashion crimes are next to heresy in the medieval code of conduct. But Joan refuses to budge. She insists her voices are real, her mission righteous, and her loyalty to the church unbroken. When asked if she believes she is in God's grace, she responds, "If I am not, may God place me there. If I am, may God keep me there." It's the kind of answer that leaves interrogators speechless and HR forms blank. Still, the verdict is a foregone conclusion. No matter how compelling her defense, the fix is in. Political necessity trumps fairness. Joan is condemned for heresy, largely for refusing to deny her visions and for resuming her inappropriate attire in prison, which she does for her own safety. Her sentence is death. On May 30, 1431, Joan is led to the market square in Rouen. She is just 19 years old. Tied to a wooden stake, she faces the crowd, some jeering, some silent, some so moved they can't help but weep. As the flames curl around her, she calls out the name of Jesus, asking for a cross. A soldier, moved by her courage, hands her a small wooden cross, which she clings to as the end approaches. Eyewitnesses say she faced her death with incredible calm, never breaking. The English want this to be the end, a cautionary tale to frighten would-be rebels into submission. But, like most poorly conceived company memos, it backfires. Joan doesn't fade away. She becomes a martyr. Even hardened English and Burgundian observers are shaken. Some cry openly. One English cleric, rumored to have watched the execution, reportedly says, "We are lost. We have burned a saint." Joan's legend only grows. Over the next decades, her unwavering faith, her battlefield bravery, and her dignified defiance at trial become the stuff of myth. 25 years later, in 1456, Pope Calixtus III orders a retrial. After digging through the paperwork and interviewing witnesses, the Church rules that Joan's original trial was a sham. She is exonerated, her name cleared. The very institution that once condemned her now admits its mistake, not that this gets her any back pay. In the centuries that follow, Joan becomes a rallying symbol for France, especially in times of crisis, during the French Wars of Religion and even the Franco-Prussian War. Her story is invoked as a beacon of courage. Her face appears everywhere, in stained glass, sculpture, epic poetry. She is recast as everything from a nationalist icon to a mystical visionary. And in 1920, nearly half a millennium after her death, the Catholic Church finally canonizes her. Joan of Arc, once condemned as a heretic, is now a saint, with a feast day on May 30th, the anniversary of her martyrdom. She remains one of the most iconic figures in history. A peasant, a prophet, a warrior, a prisoner, and ultimately a saint. Through sheer conviction, she changed the fate of a kingdom. Through fire, she became more than a legend. She became a symbol of resilience for the overlooked, the underestimated, and the misunderstood everywhere. And now, as the memory of her life flickers on, we turn from the world of royal courts and battlefields to another, quieter kind of resilience, the kind found in flour-dusted aprons and soot-streaked kitchens. Because sometimes real heroism starts in the dark, before sunrise, when the only thing that matters is the promise of fresh bread. So, you've signed up for the Medieval Baker's onboarding program. Welcome to the original graveyard shift. Your first work perk? You get to start your day in the deepest dark, long before any sensible rooster even thinks about clocking in. Midnight is when your shift begins, but there's no badge to swipe, and definitely no flex time. The rest of the town is blissfully dreaming in their hay-stuffed beds, but you're already fumbling with embers and flour, setting the stage for everyone else's morning. Step inside your bakehouse, your new open-concept office, where the decor features exposed beams and the faint aroma of smoke, yeast, and a dash of existential dread. The only light comes from guttering tallow candles and the orange glow of a fire that's barely gotten going, which means half the time you're working by memory and muscle. As you tie your flour-stained apron, you can already feel the weight of the day, literally, because sacks of grain don't carry themselves. Now, before you get too excited about your hands-on role, let's talk about your most important employee, the sourdough starter. There are no instant packets of yeast here. Instead, you're caring for a living blob that's crankier than most interns and just as prone to dying at the worst possible moment. The starter's health is your job security, your secret sauce, and your biggest workplace liability, all rolled into one. You keep it alive by feeding it with flour and water, coaxing it to bubble and rise. If you mess up, the loaves come out flat, and your manager, the entire starving town, will notice. Let's talk ingredients. The flour you use isn't the soft bleach stuff you find in modern supermarkets. Yours is rough and coarse, ground at the local mill, flecked with husks, and varying in color and texture depending on the season, the harvest, and how generous the miller is feeling. Sometimes you bulk it out with a little barley or some ground beans, stretching supplies and, let's be honest, lowering expectations. If you're lucky, the water you haul from the nearest well is only slightly murky and doesn't taste too strongly of iron or last week's laundry. Mixing the dough is a full-body workout. You lean over a wooden trough that's deep enough to lose a child in, plunging your hands into damp flour and water, working it until it clings together just right. There are no timers or thermometers. Your senses, touch, smell, and the faint hope that you remember how your predecessor did it, are all you have. If it's winter, you wrap the dough in old cloths and nestle it close to the hearth, praying it rises before you lose feeling in your fingers. In the summer, you wipe sweat from your brow and hope the dough doesn't sour too quickly. Now, the heart of your operation, the oven. Picture a giant dome of brick or clay, built to trap heat better than any eco-friendly modern appliance, but also prone to cracks, smoke leaks, and the occasional rodent squatter. You spend the first hour burning bundles of wood, oak, if you're well connected, whatever you can scrounge if you're not, until the walls glow with a deep, even heat. Then, using a long-handled wooden peel, which is basically a medieval pizza paddle crossed with a jousting lance, you sweep out the ashes and carefully wipe down the oven floor with a damp rag. By this point, your arms are sore, your face is flushed, and you've inhaled enough flour dust to keep sneezing until the next market day. But finally, you get to the main event, shaping and baking the loaves. Each one is the result of practiced hands, years of muscle memory, and a little bit of luck. You slide the dough into the oven, listening for the telltale sizzle that means the temperature is just right. Too hot, and the crust burns before the inside cooks. Too cold, and the bread comes out pale and lifeless, prompting your customers to grumble about quality control. In the medieval version of a Yelp review, as you work, the bakehouse fills with the smell of rising bread, mingling with the ever-present background notes of wood smoke and sweat. Outside, the town is still asleep. The only sounds the distant bark of a dog and the occasional clang from someone else's pre-dawn hustle. You, meanwhile, are locked in a private world of effort and anticipation, waiting for the first hint of golden crust to form. And then, just as the first light seeps through the shutters and the town starts to stir, your first loaves emerge from the oven. This is your big reveal, your product launch. The scent of fresh bread drifts out into the street, turning even the grumpiest neighbors into loyal customers, or at least hungry ones. Merchants begin setting up their stalls, church bells toll, and you, proud owner of flour-dusted fingernails and heat-pinked cheeks, have already accomplished more than most will all day. But your job isn't over. In fact, it's barely started. Deliveries await. You load baskets with warm loaves, balancing them on your hip as you trudge down cobblestone lanes. Some bread is destined for the market, where haggling is fierce and payment is often a mix of coins, promises, and the occasional IOU scribbled on a scrap of parchment. Other loaves are set aside for the Lord's table, the monastery, or the poorest families, because in the medieval town, bread is more than food. It's a kind of social currency, a daily ration that marks who's thriving and who is just getting by. Before you get too comfortable, remember that your shift doesn't end when the bread leaves the oven. You're expected to keep records, not in spreadsheets, but on wax tablets or in battered ledgers, tracking sales, grain deliveries, and, crucially, the ever-watchful eyes of the local guild officials. Woe betide the baker who tries to short-change the scales or sneak a few extra beans into the flour. The guild has spies everywhere, and their version of performance review involves public stocks and flying stale loaves. Your tools are an extension of yourself. The wooden trough, scarred by years of use, is your mixing desk. The long-handled peel is both shield and sword, saving you from burns and allowing you to maneuver loaves with the precision of a surgeon. You have measuring scoops, roughly carved and only vaguely accurate, but they're the law of the land when it comes to portion control. Scales are rare and, let's face it, unreliable. Your best asset? Your hands, strong and calloused, able to judge dough by feel alone. Lose your touch, and you might as well hang up your apron. Let's take a closer look at your workplace. The bakehouse itself is a marvel of medieval engineering, by which I mean it's mostly drafty, dim, and prone to infestations, but every part is there for a reason. Stone or timber walls keep in the heat, at least until the wind shifts. Flour is stored in sacks and barrels, piled in the corners, sometimes accompanied by the faint sound of mice running inventory checks. Sieves hang from the walls, ready to filter out the worst of the debris if you're serving the higher-paying clientele. Water is fetched in heavy buckets, sloshing precariously as you dodge apprentices and the occasional stray dog hoping for a snack. Every evening, before you can even think about resting your weary feet, you scrub down the tools, sweep the ash, and prep your workspace for another round. Tomorrow's dough needs mixing before the moon sets again, and every mistake lingers, literally, in the form of burned crusts and sour-smelling cloths. So, what role do you play in the medieval town? More than you might think. Bread is life, quite literally. For most people, it makes up the bulk of their diet, and the difference between a good loaf and a bad one can be the difference between gratitude and a riot. The bread you bake isn't just food. It's a marker of social class. The lords and wealthy merchants demand the finest white bread, manchet, soft, pale, and expensive, made from wheat flour that's been sifted and re-sifted like it's applying for a job in luxury branding. Producing it means extra hours at the grindstone, extra sieves, and, to be honest, extra headaches. The townsfolk and tradespeople settle for Ravel, a heartier wheat bread that's less refined, darker, and far more forgiving of a few stray grains. This is your standard offering, nutritious, filling, and regulated by the town council to prevent you from getting too creative with pricing or portion size. If you get it wrong, you'll hear about it, usually from someone with strong opinions and a louder voice than you'd like. And then there's the bread for the poor, muslin, rye, barley, oats, sometimes even chestnut flour, and whatever else you can scrape together. It's dense, heavy, and sometimes a bit sour, but it fills hungry bellies and keeps the peace. In lean times, you're expected to stretch it even further with beans or peas, producing loaves that could double as doorstops. The rich get their dainty white slices, the poor get whatever's left over. You are, in a sense, the HR manager for the town's appetite. Every loaf you bake is a kind of social statement. In monasteries, the bread on the refectory table might be simple and brown, reflecting vows of poverty, or it might be the same white bread you make for the lords, depending on who's visiting. At feasts, the wealthy use thick slices of stale bread as trenchers, functional, edible plates that end up as charity handouts, or, if the party's especially wild, as projectiles. The act of giving bread to the poor isn't just charity. It's the medieval equivalent of a PR campaign, a way for the powerful to advertise their generosity and ensure the goodwill of the masses. But your real challenge isn't just baking bread for every social stratum. It's surviving the scrutiny of the guilds and the ever-present threat of the law. Bakers' guilds are the original gatekeepers, regulating everything from the weight of your loaves to the amount of salt you're allowed to use. They set standards, enforce training, and make sure that nobody gets away with skimping on ingredients. To join, you have to apprentice for years, learning the secrets of the trade and absorbing the culture of quiet, flour-dusted anxiety that defines your profession. Once you're in the guild, you gain the right to operate, your official business card, your license to bake. But with great power comes great responsibility, or at least the constant fear of surprise inspections. The penalties for cutting corners are creative and highly public. Sell underweight loaves, and you might find yourself in the stocks, pelted with stale bread and jeers from your neighbors. Try to pass off poor ingredients, and you could be forced to parade through town wearing evidence of your crime. Repeat offenders risk exile, which is a medieval HR term for update your CV and try a different town. Even outside the guilds, municipal officials keep a close watch. In England, the law known as the Assize of Bread and Ale dictates exactly how much bread you can sell for a given price, adjusting for the cost of grain. Officials, with titles like breadweigher or ale taster, perform random spot checks, making sure you aren't getting too creative with your definition of family size. Bread is so essential that any whiff of cheating can spark unrest, and nobody wants to be responsible for the next bread riot. So, every day you walk a fine line between meeting demand, following the rules, and keeping your own head above water. Your performance reviews are public. Your KPIs are measured in ounces and crust, and your customers are both your livelihood and your harshest critics. Baking isn't just a craft. It's a public service, a social contract, and the oldest startup hustle in town. And as the day winds down, with the last embers fading and the bakehouse quiet once more, you get a moment to breathe. Tomorrow, the whole process begins again, early, relentless, and vital. You may not get much sleep, but you do get the satisfaction of knowing that, in a world built on bread, you're the one keeping everyone fed, if not exactly well rested. But don't loosen your apron strings just yet. The bakehouse holds more than just the secrets of rising dough and crusty loaves. Running a medieval bakehouse wasn't just demanding. In our next chapter, we'll uncover the hazards lurking around every hot oven and the indispensable, often overlooked role that women played in bread making. Stick around. Your orientation is just heating up. Welcome to your first shift in the medieval bakehouse. Please ignore the faint scent of smoke, singed hair, and generational exhaustion. Here in your new workplace, danger isn't just a footnote in the employee handbook. It's basically your most devoted co-worker. Fire is your primary tool, but it's also the office saboteur, lurking in every shadowy corner of your stone and thatch break room, just waiting for a little inattentiveness to turn the whole operation into a cautionary tale for the neighbors. Your core task is to wrangle a beast of an oven, usually a massive dome of brick or clay, that's seen more scorching summers and freezing winters than the average medieval lord's marriage contract. And because the job description includes heat walls to volcanic temperatures, you'll be lighting a fire inside the oven itself, feeding it with wood until the entire structure radiates a heat that makes your cheeks sting and your eyebrows reconsider their career choices. Forget the cozy glow of a campfire. This is a full-on inferno, one designed to bake bread for an entire neighborhood, or, on a bad day, to roast the unlucky baker's arm. Once the fire has raged long enough to heat the oven's thick walls, you get to enjoy the thrilling task of raking out the glowing embers, a process that will leave your forearms looking like you've lost a slap fight with a dragon. A damp rag or a sand-soaked brush is your cleaning tech, ensuring no stray ash flavors your product, or, worse, starts a second fire under the workbench. All this must be done quickly, because the oven's heat is a vanishing asset. Wait too long, and you're serving undercooked disappointment for dinner. Of course, medieval building codes are more of a suggestion than a guarantee. Most bakehouses are squeezed into the edges of towns or perched on the outskirts, where the threat of a runaway fire won't take out half the market square. If you're lucky, and by lucky, I mean wealthy, your bakehouse might feature fire-resistant stone or tile. But for many, it's timber, thatch, and a prayer to St. Florian, patron of people who really wish their workplace came with insurance. And it's not just the fire that wants to keep things interesting. The daily grind involves heaving sacks of flour up from cellars, hauling buckets of water, and kneading dough in troughs so large you could lose a toddler inside. The temperature inside the bakehouse regularly climbs past unpleasant and into, why am I sweating from my eyelids? Forget spa treatments. The combination of heat, smoke, and flour dust will leave your skin and lungs in a state most modern HR departments would classify as high risk. Do not attempt at home. Burns are so routine that you'll start to wonder if crispy forearms is a sign of professional pride. Between loading and unloading loaves with giant wooden peels and dodging the occasional rogue ember, you'll rack up more singed knuckles than a blacksmith on double overtime. And if you think your health plan covers smoke inhalation, think again. The closest thing to a benefits package is the occasional day off, when illness or accident shuts the whole bakehouse down. Now, let's take a brisk walk over to the heart of our operation, the women who keep this whole system from collapsing like a loaf that forgot to rise. Contrary to the marketing materials handed out by medieval guilds, women are not just support staff. In fact, across towns, villages, and bustling cities, women are the backbone of bread making. In rural areas, it's women who knead, shape, and bake the daily bread in small family ovens, often working in shifts that begin before sunrise and end long after dark. And on market days, you'll spot them at their side hustle, selling surplus loaves from doorways, or at crowded stalls, balancing baskets on their heads like ancient delivery apps with better customer service. For many women, this isn't just feeding the household. It's a rare chance at financial independence. That crusty brown loaf you just handed to a neighbor, it might help pay for shoes, candles, or, just imagine, a little extra meat for supper. In cities, the rules get a bit more complicated, but not always in the ways you'd expect. When a baker dies, it's often his widow who steps in to keep the business running. She might take over the oven, train apprentices such as daughters, nieces, or even the occasional ambitious neighbor kid. And if she manages to stay on good terms with the local guild, she could even earn the right to run her own shop. And while the guilds are mostly a boys' club, Some regions, especially in Germany and France, recognize female bakers as full-fledged professionals. These women inherit licenses, run bakeries, and sometimes even win the right to train others, pushing back against a system that prefers its bakers be male, sweaty, and slightly singed. But even when formally recognized, women juggle the same brutal hours, muscle-straining labor, and constant risk of burns or worse. The pay is usually less, the scrutiny sharper, and the penalties for underweight or poor-quality loaves swift and unforgiving. Women bakers aren't just behind the ovens. They're out in the streets, calling their wares, haggling with customers, and managing the daily accounts. If you picture a medieval bakery as a cheery family business, adjust your expectations. It's equal parts sweatshop, social hub, and battlefield, and women are right there in the trenches. During times of war or plague, when men are called away or struck down, women keep the ovens hot and the town fed. Their hands shape the dough that staves off hunger and keeps spirits from crumbling, even as their names rarely make it into the official records. Baking, for these women, is more than just work. It's a lifeline and a legacy. Mothers teach daughters not just how to mix flour and water, but how to survive and thrive in a world that measures respect by the weight of a loaf. Recipes and techniques are handed down with the same care as a family heirloom, each loaf a testament to skill, perseverance, and a stubborn refusal to let the world run out of carbs. So, next time you picture a medieval baker, don't just see the burly man with soot-stained hands. Picture the women hauling water at dawn, guiding their daughters through the steps, and handing over warm bread to neighbors with a smile that says, "Yes, I did all this, and no, you can't pay me in compliments." In every oven, on every street, women's labor and knowledge are kneaded into the crust of medieval society, nourishing not just bellies, but entire communities. And as you close the bakehouse door behind you, arms smarting, hair tinged with smoke, and the faintest whiff of pride in your nostrils, remember that every loaf carries a story. But bread wasn't just food in medieval Europe. It was sacred, political, and powerful, a symbol and a weapon, as you're about to discover in our next chapter. So here you are, fresh from your onboarding as a medieval baker, apron firmly tied, hands still dusted with flour, and now it's time for the big picture briefing. The part where you learn that bread isn't just something you bake. Around here, it's political. It's powerful. It's the glue, the currency, and sometimes the spark that sets the whole medieval HR department on fire. And yes, you're right at the center of it all, even if your name will never make it into a song or a tapestry. Let's start with the divine paperwork. If you thought the church was just about sermons and incense, think again. The institution has its flowery fingerprints all over the bread supply chain. In every corner of medieval Europe, from vast stone monasteries to tiny village chapels, bread is treated as more than food. It's a symbol of life, sacrifice, and the very presence of the divine. The Eucharist, that's the pivotal moment where bread is transformed into the body of Christ, sits right at the heart of this. No pressure, but the bread for this ritual is not just any old loaf. Only the purest white wheat flour is allowed, no shortcuts, and it has to be unleavened, which means none of your fancy sourdough starters here. Inside the monastery's shadowy kitchens, there are monks who are basically the original quality control team. They're assigned this sacred duty, working silently, usually at night, because apparently God prefers a night shift. The ovens are special, the atmosphere hushed, and every wafer is stamped with symbols so holy that even touching them feels like handling some kind of divine HR memo. Drop one on the floor, and you'll be saying extra prayers at evening roll call. But the church's influence on bread doesn't stop with ritual. Monasteries double as medieval food corporations. They own massive tracts of land, manage their own bakehouses, and turn out mountains of bread, not just for monks, but for workers, visitors, and the occasional surprise audit from a hungry bishop. A typical monastic meal. Think bread, a little cheese, some ale, and, if you're lucky, maybe a dab of pottage on the side. For the poor, monasteries are more than just a spiritual sanctuary. They're the original soup kitchens. At the gates, beggars and travellers queue up for alms bread, the medieval equivalent of free samples at the supermarket, except with more humility and fewer toothpicks. Even outside the cloister walls, the church keeps its hands in the dough. Cathedrals and parish churches collect bread donations from local bakers and wealthy patrons. These offerings aren't just tucked away for later. Sometimes they're displayed like sacred trophies on feast days, handed out to the needy, or paraded through the streets in elaborate processions. Some towns even have bread altars, where loaves are blessed and distributed in memory of the dead. It's part charity, part performance review, and all very public. Of course, where there's bread, there's regulation. In many towns, ecclesiastical courts act as the original Better Business Bureau for bakers. If a customer thinks they've been shorted a crumb, chances are the local priest will be settling the dispute, and don't think you can fudge the scales. Cheating customers out of bread isn't just bad business. It's considered a sin. The church's belief in fair dealing ties the morality of the soul to the morality of the marketplace, which is a lot to ponder while you're scraping burnt dough from the oven. Then there are the special occasions, those moments when the church's calendar flares up with feast days and festivals. On these days, bakers get to show off. Rich, spiced loaves shaped like crosses or doves hit the shelves, and everyone knows which bakeries have the best ceremonial bread. These celebratory loaves don't just taste good. They reinforce community bonds, mark the turning of seasons, and give everyone a reason to gather, gossip, and judge your crumb structure. For you, supplying bread to the church isn't just a line on your resume. It's a way to participate in the sacred economy of the age. Every loaf you bake for the altar or the poor is a blend of labor, belief, and ritual. The oven becomes a kind of chapel, the work a quiet act of devotion. In a world where faith weaves through every corner of daily life, your bread is both spiritual nourishment and a statement of trust. Now, shift your attention from the incense-scented aisles of the church to the rougher, rowdier corridors of power. Bread isn't just holy, it's political dynamite. Rulers, mayors, guildmasters, and kings all know that controlling the bread supply is as good as controlling the people. Bread makes up the bulk of the medieval diet, sometimes 70% or more. That means your product is basically the operating system of daily life. If bread falters, everything else crashes. This is where the fun really begins. Cities and kingdoms pass laws to fix bread prices, like England's assize of bread and ale. The rules are simple. When grain prices go up because of drought, war, or some other minor apocalypse, the price of bread stays put, but the size of the loaf shrinks. If you're a baker, that means you're suddenly expected to do more with less. Your margins evaporate, but the law is the law. Try to sneak a smaller loaf onto the shelf, and you're flirting with disaster. And the punishments? Oh, they're creative. Get caught selling underweight bread, and you might find yourself in the stocks, holding your shameful loaf for all to see, while the town's teenagers remind you that public humiliation is timeless. Fines, shaming, even outright bans from baking, those are all on the table. In some especially tense years, like during famines or wars, bakers are placed under military guard to make sure every crumb is accounted for. Inspectors can show up unannounced, scales in hand, ready to weigh your loaves and judge your soul. Let's not forget the bread riots. When scarcity hits and prices soar, the crowd has no patience for Excel spreadsheets or economic theory. Accusations of hoarding fly, mobs gather, and shops can be ransacked in the time it takes to say, supply chain disruption. Your ledgers might go up in smoke, and city officials may swoop in to seize your grain or subsidize your bread just to stop the unrest. Bread is charity. Bread is leverage. Bread is the original political campaign swag. If you want loyalty, hand out loaves at festivals. If you want peace, keep the ovens going and the shelves full. Fail, and you'll learn firsthand just how much power a hungry crowd can wield. So here you are, standing at the crossroads of faith, hunger, and authority. You're not a king, not a bishop, not even a guildmaster, but you wield a kind of quiet influence that runs deeper than the moat around the castle. Nobody sings about the baker in the marketplace, but your hands shape the fate of the town every morning before the sun is up. Your work hums along in the background, as essential as the bell that calls people to prayer or the market cry that signals a new day. Bread follows every step of life's journey. It's present at baptisms, shared at weddings, broken in mourning, and honored on altars. Every loaf that leaves your oven carries the weight of tradition, belief, and survival. The skills you use are passed down through flour-dusted hands, from master to apprentice, from parent to child. You learn by feel, not by reading a manual. You know how to tell if a dough is ready by the sound it makes when you slap it, and how to judge the oven heat by the scent of toasting crust, not by checking a thermometer that won't exist for another few centuries. Every town has its own flavor. Some bakers work with rye and oats, others with barley or imported wheat. The local bread is as much a part of your identity as the dialect you speak or the clothes you wear. As trade grows and towns bustle, baking shifts from a small household craft to a proper industry. Windmills and watermills speed up flour production, roads get better, and suddenly your work is part of a bigger, busier world. But the core rhythm never changes. Rise, knead, shape, bake, feed. It's a cycle as old as civilization, and you're its guardian. Even centuries later, your influence lingers. The word companion comes from the Latin for with bread, as in, the person you share bread with is the one you trust and call friend. The old bakers' guilds are the ancestors of modern food safety standards, and the communal ovens of your village are the blueprint for today's neighborhood bakeries. Your real legacy isn't just the loaves you send out into the street, but the life you help sustain, the bonds you help forge. So, as you dust off your hands at the end of another long day, know this: through flour, fire, and faith, you have fed more than bodies. You have nourished a society. The world may not remember your name, but the warmth of your bread, the comfort it gave, and the community it built echo through history. In a world of kings and cathedrals, the true foundation is set by the humble baker. And as your shift ends and the town settles into sleep, you can rest easy knowing you've left a lasting mark, one loaf at a time.